Alex, her voice came soft from the doorway, tentative, like she was afraid of breaking something already cracked. He didn't turn. Not right away. He watched her reflection appear behind him, Clara. Her hair slightly messy from a long shift at the hospital, eyes tired but warm, wearing that oversized sweater he'd once teased her for loving. She held 2 mugs of tea, steam curling into the air between them like a fragile bridge. "You're home late," she said, stepping inside. "Again. I had a merger call with Zurich," he replied, voice flat, still staring out at the city. "It ran long." She set 1 mug on his desk. The chamomile scent, her favorite, filled the space, out of place among the leather and steel. "It's Tuesday, Alex. You promised we'd talk tonight. About the clinic. About us." Finally, he turned. His eyes, sharp, calculating in boardrooms, softened for just a fraction of a second when they met hers. But then the mask slid back into place. "I know, and we will. But Clara, I can't do this right now. Not when everything's hanging by a thread at work." She flinched almost imperceptibly. "It's not everything that's hanging by a thread, Alex. It's us. We've been trying for 5 years. 5 years of hope, of injections, of waiting, and now we're finally doing IVF. This isn't just another project on your calendar." He set the bourbon down harder than he meant to. "Don't make this about me failing you. I'm doing everything I can. Are you?" Her voice cracked, raw with exhaustion and something deeper, grief he refused to name. "Because from where I'm standing, it feels like you're building walls instead of a family." He stepped closer, jaw tight. "You think I don't want this, you think I don't lie awake wondering why it's so hard for us, but I can't just break down, Clara. I can't afford to fall apart." "Why not?" she whispered, tears glistening but not falling. "Maybe that's exactly what we need, to fall apart together, so we can put something real back together." For a moment, silence stretched between them, thick with everything unsaid. He wanted to reach for her. God, he wanted to. But the fear, the terror of vulnerability, of not being enough, of losing control, clamped around his chest like a vice. Instead, he turned back to the window. "I'll be in the guest room tonight," he said quietly. "I need to clear my head." She didn't argue. She just nodded, picked up her untouched tea, and walked out. The door clicked shut behind her with finality. Alexander closed his eyes. In that moment, he didn't feel like a magnate. He didn't feel powerful. He felt small, hollow, trapped in a life of his own making, where success was measured in stock prices and failures were buried under layers of silence. He didn't know it then. But that night, standing in the cold glow of his perfect empire, he was already losing everything that truly mattered. And the worst part, he wouldn't even realize it until it was too late. The rain kept falling. The city kept shining. And Alexander Vance stood alone, holding a glass of bourbon he couldn't bring himself to drink, while the woman who loved him walked away with a heart too full to carry by herself. Certo, agora tu como narrador e storyteller desenvolva a historia sem marcacos com o nome de cada tópico que for desenvolve. Mi conti sobrio tópico tu com dialogo como su fosso espectador. Sempre lembrando de desenvolver com vida moco. Com os sentimentos de forma que a estrutura de narrativa utiliza uma linha temporal linear de modo o espectador sentir o que o personagem está sentindo amigos. Com 6.000 characters when 3, max the morning sun spilled through the kitchen window of their Brooklyn brownstone, painting golden stripes across worn wooden floors. Clara Bennett stood at the counter, humming softly as she stirred honey into her tea. Chamomile again, because it calmed the storm inside her. She wore faded jeans and a soft cotton blouse, her dark curls pulled into a messy bun, a smudge of flour on her cheek from the banana bread she'd baked the night before. It was a small ritual, this baking, something to fill the quiet hours when the house felt too big, too empty, despite Alexander's presence. She glanced at the framed photo on the shelf, the two of them in Santorini 3 years ago, before the tests, before the injections, before hope became a currency they kept spending with no return. In the picture, she was laughing, head thrown back, his arm around her waist like he couldn't bear to let go. She touched the frame lightly, then turned away. Her phone buzzed on the counter. A reminder: fertility clinic, 2 p.m. Embryo transfer consultation. Her breath hitched. She closed her eyes, pressing a hand to her stomach. Not because it hurt, but because it ached with longing. She'd wanted this for so long. Not just a baby, family, laughter in the hallway, tiny shoes by the door, bedtime stories whispered in the dark. She'd imagined it all since she was a girl playing with dolls, tucking them in with care that felt like prophecy. A knock at the door startled her. It was Mrs. Delaney from next door, holding a basket of fresh lemons. "Thought you could use these, dear," the older woman said, her eyes kind. "You've been quiet lately." Clara forced a smile. "Thank you, Eleanor. That's sweet." The woman hesitated, then reached out, squeezing Clara's hand. "You know, some things take time, but they're worth the wait." Clara nodded, throat tight. "I hope so." After she closed the door, she leaned against it, eyes closed. Worth the wait. But what if time ran out? What if her body said no one? Last time later that afternoon, she sat in the sterile, softly lit exam room of the Manhattan Fertility Center, clutching Alexander's hand. Though he'd arrived 15 minutes late, still on a call, his cufflinks gleaming like ice. The doctor, Dr. Lang, spoke in calm, clinical tones about embryo viability, success rates, hormone protocols. Clara listened, nodding, but her heart wasn't in the statistics. It was in the quiet dream she carried like a secret flame. "Statistically, with your age and his sperm quality," Dr. Lang said gently, "you have a strong chance this cycle." Alexander gave a curt nod. "Good. We'll proceed." But Clara looked at him, really looked, and saw the distance in his eyes. Not disinterest exactly, more like dread wrapped in control. He was treating this like a business negotiation, not the birth of a miracle. That night, after he'd retreated to his study with a glass of whiskey and his laptop, Clara sat on the edge of their bed, staring at the ceiling. She whispered into the dark, voice trembling, "Please, just let this work. Let me give him something he can't walk away from." She didn't mean it cruelly. She meant, let me give him a reason to stay, to feel, to be ours. The next morning, she woke before dawn. She tiptoed to the bathroom, took the pregnancy test she'd hidden in the back of the cabinet, just in case, even though it was too early, and stared at the blank result. Nothing, of course. It had only been 10 days. But then, a week later, during a routine blood draw at the clinic, a nurse smiled at her with tears in her eyes. "Clara, your beta-HCG levels are rising beautifully. You're pregnant." Clara's knees nearly gave out. She gripped the edge of the chair, breath coming in short gasps. "Really, are you sure?" The nurse nodded, squeezing her shoulder. "You're carrying, and judging by the levels, it might be more than one." Clara laughed through tears, hands flying to her belly. More than one. Twins, triplets, it didn't matter. They were hers. Theirs. She called Alexander immediately. He didn't answer. She left a voicemail, voice shaking with joy. "Alex, it worked. We're going to have a baby. Maybe even more than one. Please, come home. I need you to hold me." He called back 3 hours later, from a conference in Boston. "That's incredible, Clara. Truly. But I'm in the middle of closing the Genovate deal. I'll be back Friday. We'll celebrate then." The joy curdled in her chest. She sat on the floor of their empty nursery, the room they'd barely started painting, and cried silently, one hand resting on her stomach, the other clutching the ultrasound printout the nurse had slipped her. She didn't know it yet, but this moment, the fragile, radiant hope blooming inside her, was the last time she'd try to reach him before the world cracked open. Because 3 weeks later, the clinic would call with devastating news: a lab error, a mix-up in embryo labeling. "We're so sorry, Mrs. Vance. The pregnancy test was a false positive. There was never a viable embryo." She'd collapse. She'd beg for second tests. She'd scream into the phone. But the clinic stood by their correction. And Alexander, when he finally came home, he didn't hold her. He looked at her with cold, shattered eyes and said, voice hollow, "I can't do this anymore, Clara. Every time I look at you, I see failure." He left that night, suitcase Keys on the counter. Silence where a family should have been. But here, in this sunlit kitchen, weeks before the storm, Clara still believed. She still baked bread. She still hummed. She still dreamed of tiny fingers curling around hers. And that's what broke your heart the most. Not the loss that came later, but the love that existed before it. Pure, tender, unseen, but the truth wouldn't stay buried. It was a Tuesday, rain again, soft and persistent. When she finally sat him down in the living room, he just returned from a weekend retreat in Aspen, tanned and crisp in a white shirt, smelling of pine and expensive cologne. He barely looked at her as he loosened his tie. "Clara, I told you I need space. Not another conversation about..." "It's not about that," she interrupted, voice steadier than she felt. She held out the clinic's letter, her fingers trembling only slightly. "Read this." He frowned, took it reluctantly. His eyes scanned the page, then froze. Due to a critical administrative error in specimen labeling, the initial positive beta-HCG result was attributed to a misidentified sample. Further testing confirms no viable pregnancy was established. "We extend our deepest apologies." He lowered the paper slowly. His face, usually so composed, twisted in something between disbelief and grim vindication. "So, it was never real." "It felt real," she whispered. "My body. I knew something was different. I felt them." "Them," he scoffed. But there was pain beneath it. "Clara, you were imagining things. Stress. Hope. It happens." Her chest tightened like a fist closing around her heart. "You don't get to decide what I felt. You weren't even here. I was building the future we were supposed to have." He shot back, voice rising. "Do you think I enjoy missing every appointment, every test? But someone has to keep the lights on while you chase miracles." "Chase miracles," her voice broke. "Is that what you think? This is a fantasy, Alex. I wanted to give you children. I wanted to give us a family. But you treated it like a failed investment." He turned away, jaw clenched. "Because it hurts too much to treat it like anything else." Silence fell, thick and suffocating. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance, echoing the ache between them. Then, quietly, she said, "What if it wasn't a mistake?" He turned, eyes sharp. What if the clinic was wrong? What if I really was pregnant?" He stared at her like she'd lost her mind. "Clara, they ran 3 confirmatory tests. There's no embryo, no heartbeat, no pregnancy. It's over." But she couldn't shake the feeling. The deep, instinctive certainty that had lived in her bones for weeks. The nausea that came at dawn. The way her breasts ached. The dreams so vivid they left her breathless. 2 days later, against his protests, she went to a different clinic. St. Luke's, downtown, no affiliation with his company. She used her maiden name, paid in cash. The nurse drew her blood with gentle hands. "You've been through a lot," she said softly. "Whatever the result, you're not alone." Clara nodded, tears welling. "I just need to know the truth." She waited 48 hours in agony. On the 3rd morning, her phone rang. "Mrs. Bennett," a calm voice said, "your HCG levels are not only elevated, they're doubling every 48 hours. And the ultrasound shows 3 gestational sacs." Clara's breath stopped. 3, yes, you're carrying triplets." The world tilted. She sank onto the kitchen floor, phone pressed to her ear, tears streaming silently down her face. Not grief, not joy, something deeper, awe mixed with terror. 3 lives. Inside me. Ours. She called Alexander immediately, voice shaking, heart hammering. "Alex, you need to come home. Now." He answered on the 3rd ring, distracted. "Clara, I'm in a board meeting." "Now," she cried, the word raw, desperate. "Please, I have proof. I'm pregnant. With triplets." The first clinic made a mistake. A huge one. There was a pause. Then, coldly, "You're asking me to believe that after they retracted it after all the tests?" "They were wrong, Alex. I have the blood work. The ultrasound. Come see." Another silence. Longer this time. She could hear the muffled voices in his office. The clink of a coffee cup. "I can't," he finally said. Not today. Maybe next week. Next week, her voice cracked. Our children are growing inside me right now, and you're choosing a meeting. I'm choosing stability, he snapped. Do you have any idea what happens if I walk out of this deal? Do you know how many people depend on me, on us? Us. She laughed, bitter and broken. There is no us, Alex. Not if you can't see what's right in front of you. She hung up, and in that moment, something inside her hardened. She didn't call him again. Instead, she packed a single suitcase that night. Clothes, her grandmother's locket, the ultrasound printout folded carefully in her wallet. She left a note on the kitchen counter, I won't raise them in a house where love is conditional on success. She didn't know where she was going, only that she couldn't stay. As she stepped into the rain, one hand resting protectively over her stomach, she whispered to the lives within her, don't worry, my darlings. Mama's got you. Clara, Lena's voice crackled through, warm and immediate. Oh my God, are you okay? You sound. I need a place to stay, just for a little while. There was no hesitation. Pack your heart, not your pride. I've got room, and tea, and zero judgment. 3 hours later, Clara was in Lena's sun-drenched Brooklyn apartment, tucked into a corner of the couch with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, sipping ginger tea. Lena, her oldest friend since nursing school, sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes wide as Clara told her everything. The false negative, the second test, the triplets, Alexander's silence. He didn't even look at the ultrasound, Clara murmured, tracing the rim of her mug. He just dismissed it, like I was making it up to trap him. Lena reached out, squeezing her knee. Then he doesn't deserve to see them grow. Clara shook her head, tears welling. It's not about deserving, it's about safety. I can't raise them in a home where their father sees them as a burden. Or worse, a mistake. Over the next weeks, Clara vanished from Alexander's world. She changed her number, closed her social media, let the lease on their brownstone expire. She found a small job at a community clinic in Queens, using her nursing license under her maiden name. She painted the nursery of her new one-bedroom apartment in soft blues and greens, hung mobiles above the crib she bought secondhand, and whispered goodnight to her belly every evening. She never told anyone about the father, not even Lena. Meanwhile, Alexander searched. At first, he told himself it was concern, then pride, then panic. He called her phone, disconnected. He went to the brownstone. Empty, keys left on the counter like a final verdict. He contacted her sister. She doesn't want to be found, Alex. He stood in their silent home one evening, surrounded by unpacked boxes from a life abandoned, and finally broke. He sank to his knees in the half-painted nursery, fingers brushing the yellow wall she'd started alone. What did I do? He whispered into the emptiness. But there was no answer, only the echo of his own choices. 3 months passed, then 6. Clara's belly swelled. She felt the first kicks, tiny flutters that soon became strong, rhythmic thumps. 3 hearts, 3 souls. She cried every time, not from sadness, but from awe. One afternoon, during a routine scan at St. Luke's, the technician smiled. They're healthy, strong. All 3. Clara placed a hand on the screen. What are their chances? Excellent, the woman said gently. But you'll need support. Triplets are intense. Clara nodded. I know. She didn't say she had no one. That night, she sat on her fire escape, watching the city lights flicker to life, and wrote a letter she'd never send Alex. If you're reading this, it means I couldn't protect them from your absence. But I tried. I carried them through silence, through fear, through nights I wasn't sure I'd make it. They're perfect, all 3, and they have your eyes, I can already tell. I hope one day you'll see them, not as a mistake, not as a burden, but as the miracle we almost lost, because someone was too afraid to hope. She folded it, tucked it into a drawer, and went back inside. Back in Manhattan, Alexander sat in a boardroom, signing papers that would merge his company with a European giant. He'd grown colder, sharper, more efficient. The press called him the ice magnate. But at night, He still walked past the nursery door in his empty penthouse and paused, as if listening for a sound that would never come. He never imagined that while he was building empires, Clara was building a family, with or without him. And he certainly never imagined that in less than a year, he would see them, all three, alive, real, at a charity gala he almost didn't attend. But that was still months away. For now, Clara rocked gently in her tiny apartment, hands resting on the curve of her stomach, whispering names she'd chosen in secret. Eli, Noah, Lily. She called Lena at 2 a.m., voice tight with fear. It's happening. Within 20 minutes, Lena was at her door, snow dusting her coat, eyes wide with urgency. Okay, breathe. We're going to St. Luke's. I've already called ahead. In the back of the ambulance, Clara gripped Lena's hand, teeth clenched against the pain, whispering over and over, "They're coming. They're really coming." At the hospital, chaos unfolded with practiced calm. Nurses moved like dancers in scrubs, monitors beeped in frantic rhythm, and doctors spoke in low, steady tones that couldn't quite mask the tension. Preterm triplets, high risk, possible NICU stay, possible complications. Clara didn't care. She pushed through the pain, through the fear, through the loneliness that clawed at her chest like a living thing. "Where are you?" Alex, the thought came unbidden, raw and aching, not because she wanted him there, but because no one should bring life into the world feeling this alone. At 6:17 a.m., Eli was born, tiny, red-faced, crying with a voice far too strong for his 3.2 pounds. At 6:22, Noah followed, quieter, but with eyes already searching, as if looking for his mother. At 6:28, Lily arrived, fierce, squalling, a fighter from her first breath. Clara wept as they placed each one on her chest, if only for a few precious seconds before the NICU team whisked them away. She touched their impossibly soft cheeks, traced their miniature fingers, and whispered, "You're safe now. Mama's here." But as the adrenaline faded, exhaustion and grief crashed over her like a wave. She lay in the sterile hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, tears slipping silently down her temples into her hair. Lena sat beside her, holding her hand. "They're perfect, Clara. All three." Clara nodded, but her voice was hollow. "He'll never know them. Not really. Even if he finds out, he'll think I lied, that I kept them from him out of spite." "Then let him think it," Lena said fiercely. "You protected them. That's what matters." But Clara knew it wasn't that simple, because deep down, she still remembered the man he'd been before the empire, before the fear. The man who'd held her under the stars in Santorini and whispered, "Someday, we'll fill a house with laughter." That man deserved to know his children existed. But the man he'd become, she wasn't sure he deserved anything at all. Meanwhile, across the city, Alexander sat in his penthouse office, reviewing quarterly reports under the cold glow of a desk lamp. It had been 9 months since Clara disappeared. 9 months of silence. 9 months of pretending he didn't wake up every morning reaching for a ghost. His assistant knocked softly. "Mr. Vance, the board is waiting for your call." He nodded, voice flat. "Give me 5. He opened the bottom drawer of his desk, the one he hadn't touched in months, and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a silver rattle he'd bought the day they'd confirmed the IVF cycle. He'd never given it to her. He'd been waiting for the right moment. There had never been a right moment. He closed the box, shoved it back, and stood. But as he turned toward the door, his phone buzzed. An alert from his legal team. Routine update on the Genovate acquisition. Buried in the fine print, St. Luke's Medical Center, a minor stakeholder in the merger, has flagged a potential liability related to a past administrative error in reproductive services. Alexander froze. St. Luke's, Clara's clinic. His pulse roared in his ears. He scrolled frantically through the document until he found it. A footnote referencing a misidentified embryo sample from 18 months prior. The case had been quietly settled. No names disclosed, but the date matched their cycle. His breath came fast, shallow. What if? No, impossible. The clinic had retracted the pregnancy. He'd seen the reports. But then, why had Clara vanished the same week? A cold dread coiled in his gut. He grabbed his coat and keys without thinking. He drove through the blizzard like a man possessed, tires skidding on ice, heart hammering against his ribs. He didn't know what he was looking for, only that everything had been wrong. He arrived at St. Luke's just after 7 a.m., snow clinging to his shoulders, eyes wild as he demanded answers from the front desk. "I need to speak to someone in maternal records. Now." The nurse hesitated. "Sir, visiting hours for NICU don't start until—" "Not visiting," he cut in, voice raw. "I need to know if a patient named Clara Bennett delivered here last night." The nurse's expression shifted, recognition, then caution. "I'm sorry, but I can't disclose that." "Please," Alexander said, and for the first time in years, his voice cracked. "If she's here, if she had them, I need to know." The nurse studied him, the desperation in his eyes, the snow melting on his collar, the way his hands trembled not from cold, but from something deeper. After a long pause, she sighed. "Wait here." 10 minutes later, she returned with a sealed envelope. She left instructions. "If you ever came asking, she wanted you to have this." Alexander took it with shaking hands. Inside was a single ultrasound image, 3 tiny forms curled together, and a note in Clara's handwriting. "They're real, Alex. They always were. I didn't hide them from you. You walked away before you saw them." See, he sank into a plastic chair in the hospital lobby, the image pressed to his chest, snow still melting in his hair. Around him, the world moved on. Nurses rushing, babies crying, life unfolding in all its messy, miraculous chaos. But Alexander Vance sat frozen, tears finally breaking free, as the truth crashed over him with the weight of 1,000 regrets. 3 impossibly small faces. Eli with a shock of dark hair like his own. Noah blinking slowly with Clara's wide, thoughtful eyes. Lily already frowning as if the world had already asked too much of her. His breath caught. His knees nearly buckled. "My children." The words echoed in his chest like a prayer he hadn't known he was capable of uttering. But just as he took a step forward, a nurse gently guided Clara to stand, helping her lean over the incubator to touch Lily's hand through the porthole. The tenderness in that gesture, the quiet, unwavering devotion, was something he'd never given her, something he hadn't believed he was capable of giving anyone. And in that moment, shame swallowed him whole. Who was he to walk in now, the man who'd left her when she needed him most, the man who'd chosen a boardroom over her trembling voice on the phone? He turned and walked away. Not because he didn't want them, but because he knew, really knew, that showing up now with his guilt and his grief and his sudden, desperate love might do more harm than good. Clara didn't need a hero. She needed stability, safety, a father who wouldn't vanish the moment things got hard. And he wasn't that man. Not yet. Back in her hospital room that evening, Clara stared at the ceiling, listening to the rhythmic beeping of the monitors down the hall, her children's lifelines. Lena sat on the edge of the bed, peeling an orange. "He was here," Lena said quietly, not looking up. Clara's breath hitched. "Who? Don't play dumb." "Alexander. I saw him in the lobby. He looked wrecked." Clara closed her eyes. "Did he come in?" "No. He stood outside the NICU for almost an hour, then left." A tear slipped down her temple. Good. Lena frowned. "Clara, he's their father. He was their father the day he chose a merger over my call," she said, voice low but firm. "He's had 9 months to find us. 9 months to ask questions, to dig, to care. He didn't. But he's here now. Now it's convenient," she whispered. "Now that they're real. Now that they exist in the world, not just in a test result he could ignore." She sat up slowly, wincing from the C-section, and looked at Lena with eyes that held both sorrow and steel. "I won't let them grow up thinking love is conditional, that they have to earn their father's presence. If he wants to be in their lives, he doesn't get to do it on his terms. He does it on theirs." Lena nodded slowly. "So what do you do?" Clara took a deep breath. "I protect them, like I always have. She reached into the drawer beside her bed and pulled out a legal envelope. Inside was a notarized document she'd prepared weeks ago, just in case. "I filed for sole legal and physical custody this morning," she said. "Before I even went into labor. I knew if they survived, he'd come running. And I couldn't risk him walking away again, with their hearts in his hands." Lena squeezed her hand. "You're stronger than you know." Clara smiled faintly. "No, I'm just a mother who finally stopped hoping for a man and started fighting for her children." That night, as snow continued to fall over the city, Clara sat in the NICU again, whispering to each of her babies through the incubator walls. "To Eli, you'll be brave like your name. To Noah, you'll be kind even when the world isn't. To Lily, you'll be fierce because you were born fighting." She didn't mention their father. Not yet. But as she touched the glass over Lily's tiny hand, she whispered one more thing. So soft, only the stars could hear, "And if he ever earns the right, I'll tell you about him too." Across town, Alexander sat alone in his penthouse, the ultrasound image taped to his bedroom mirror. He hadn't slept, hadn't eaten. He'd spent hours on the phone with lawyers, investigators, medical ethicists, piecing together what the clinic had done, how the error had happened, how Clara had known the truth all along, and how he'd failed her. He picked up his phone, thumb hovering over her old number. Disconnected, useless. Then, slowly, he opened a new document on his laptop. Subject: petition for paternity acknowledgement and shared custody, Vance triplets. His fingers trembled as he typed. He wasn't asking for forgiveness. He was asking for a chance. Not as Alexander Vance, magnate, but as Alex, the man who once held Clara under the stars and promised her a house full of laughter. The man who still remembered how to love. If only someone would let him try. Clara moved through it all like a woman reborn. Not untouched by pain, but reshaped by it. Her hair was shorter now, practical. Her eyes held shadows, yes, but also a quiet fire. She worked part-time at the community clinic 3 days a week. Lena watched the babies on those days, and on weekends, Clara took them to the park, letting them nap in a triple stroller beneath the trees while she read poetry or simply sat in silence, breathing in the miracle of ordinary peace. One Saturday morning, Eli babbled from his bouncer, drool glistening on his chin, while Noah stared intently at a sunbeam dancing on the wall. Lily, ever the storm, screamed from her crib, hungry, impatient, alive. Clara scooped her up, pressing her close. "I know, my lioness. The world moves too slow for you, doesn't it?" Lena leaned against the doorway, sipping coffee. "She's got his temper." Clara froze. "Don't. I'm not saying it to hurt you," Lena said gently. "I'm saying it because it's true, and pretending they don't carry him in their bones won't protect them. It'll just confuse them later." Clara sat down heavily in the rocking chair, Lily nursing at her breast, eyes fluttering shut in contentment. "I filed the custody papers, Lena. He hasn't responded. Not a word. Maybe he's respecting your space. Or maybe he's already moved on," Clara whispered. "Built another empire. Found someone who doesn't come with complications." But even as she said it, her gaze drifted to the windowsill, where a single envelope sat, unopened, stamped with the logo of Vance Biogenics. It had arrived a week ago. She hadn't touched it. That afternoon, while the babies napped, she finally picked it up. Her hands shook as she tore it open. Inside was no legal document, no demand, no accusation, just a letter. "Clara, I won't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it, but I need you to know. I've spent every day since that blizzard night trying to become someone worthy of them. I've stepped down as CEO, hired an ethics board to investigate the clinic, set up a foundation in their names to support families affected by medical errors. I'm not doing it for you, or for them. I'm doing it because I finally see love isn't control. It's surrender. If you ever let me, I'd like to meet them. Not as their father, because I haven't earned that title, but as a man who's learning how to show up." Alex's tears blurred the ink. She read it 3 times. Then she folded it carefully and tucked it into the same drawer as the ultrasound. Not acceptance, not rejection, just possibility. Meanwhile, Alexander lived in a rented brownstone 3 neighborhoods away. No penthouse, no staff, no armor. He walked to a small office every morning where he worked on rebuilding his company's ethics protocols, not its profits. He attended therapy. He read parenting books like sacred texts. He kept a journal titled Letters I'll Never Send, filled with apologies, hopes, and clumsy attempts to imagine bedtime stories for children who didn't know his voice. One evening, he stood outside a park near Clara's neighborhood, hidden behind an oak tree, watching from a distance as she pushed the triple stroller along a path. The babies were bundled in pastel blankets, sunlight catching their hair, Eli's dark curls, Noah's thoughtful gaze, Lily's tiny fist raised in protest at a passing pigeon. Clara laughed, a sound he hadn't heard in years, and it cut through him like grace. He didn't approach, he just watched, and for the first time he understood love wasn't about claiming. It was about witnessing. Later that night, he sat at his desk and wrote another letter, this one not to Clara, but to them. Dear Eli, Noah, and Lily, you don't know me, but I know you. I know Eli loves the sound of rain. I know Noah watches birds like their secrets. I know Lily cries when music stops. Your mother tells the world with her eyes. I'm learning to listen. He sealed it in an envelope addressed only to my children and placed it in a box with the others. He didn't send it, but he kept writing, because hope, he was learning, wasn't a grand gesture. It was showing up even when no one was watching, even when you weren't sure you'd ever be seen. And somewhere, in a quiet apartment filled with the scent of baby powder and chamomile tea, Clara held her sleeping daughter and whispered into the dark. He sat at his desk one rain-soaked evening, the city outside blurred by water-streaked glass, staring at a photo he'd taken from afar weeks ago. Clara in the park, kneeling beside the stroller, tying Noah's tiny shoe while Eli reached for a fallen leaf and Lily shrieked with laughter at a passing dog. He'd zoomed in so many times the image was pixelated, but he didn't care. It was the closest he'd been to them in over a year. His phone buzzed. A message from his former COO, the board approved your resignation. They're calling it a strategic pivot. No one believes you're really stepping away. Alexander typed back, I'm not stepping away. I'm stepping into something I should have chosen long ago. He hadn't told anyone, not his lawyers, not his therapist, not even his estranged sister, that he'd quietly sold most of his shares in Vance Biogenics. The money diverted into a trust fund for the triplets, managed by an independent fiduciary, with instructions that not a cent could be accessed by him, not even for emergencies. He wanted them to have security, yes, but more than that, he wanted Clara to know this wasn't leverage. This wasn't control. This was penance. He stood and walked to the closet, pulling out a box labeled for them. Inside were 3 hand-knitted blankets, blue, green, and lavender, made by a woman in Maine he'd never met, but whose daughter had lost twins to a similar clinic error. He'd commissioned them months ago, too afraid to deliver them, too ashamed to keep them hidden. You're losing your mind, he muttered to himself, running a finger over the soft wool. They don't even know your name. But then his phone rang. Not a business call, not a lawyer, a blocked number. He answered on instinct. Alexander, his breath stopped. It was Clara, not the voice from memory, the one that used to laugh easily, that whispered secrets in the dark, but a voice layered with exhaustion, urgency, and something else, fear. What's wrong, he asked, already reaching for his coat. It's Lily, she said, voice cracking. She's burning up, 104 degrees. She won't stop crying. The pediatrician said it might be sepsis. They're admitting her to St. Luke's now. The world narrowed to a single point. Where are you? On the way. In the cab. Eli and Noah are with Lena. But, Alex. Her voice broke completely. I can't do this alone. Those 4 words shattered him. He was out the door before she finished speaking, keys jangling in his hand, heart hammering like a war drum. I'm coming, he said, voice raw. Don't hang up. Just stay on the line. She didn't, but she didn't hang up either. He heard her breathing, shallow, panicked, through the line as he sped through rain-slicked streets, running red lights, muttering prayers he hadn't spoken since childhood. Talk to me, Clara, he urged. Tell me about Lily. She looked at me this morning and smiled, Clara whispered, tears thick in her voice, like she knew something was coming, like she was saying, hold on, Mama, I'm still here. Alexander's vision blurred. She's strong. She gets that from you. No, Clara said softly. She gets it from us. The word hung between them. Us. Fragile, unexpected, loaded with everything they'd lost and everything they might still reclaim. When he arrived at St. Luke's, he found her in the ER hallway, soaked from the rain, clutching Lily's tiny jacket, face streaked with tears. The moment she saw him, her knees buckled. He caught her before she fell. For a heartbeat, they just stood there, foreheads almost touching, breaths mingling in the sterile air, the weight of a year's silence pressing down on them. Then she pulled back, eyes searching his. Why did you come? Because she's my daughter, he said, voice breaking. And you're not alone anymore. A nurse called her name. Lily was being moved to pediatric ICU. Without thinking, Alexander followed. At the door, Clara hesitated. You can't just walk in there like you belong. I don't expect to, he said. But let me stand outside. Let me wait. Let me be here. She studied him. The dark circles under his eyes, the tremor in his hands, the raw fear in his gaze that mirrored her own. Finally, she nodded. Inside, Lily lay swaddled in wires and monitors, oxygen prongs in her nose, her tiny chest rising and falling too fast. Clara sat beside her, holding her hand through the incubator's porthole, whispering lullabies through tears. Outside the glass, Alexander stood vigil. He didn't speak, didn't demand, didn't perform. He just stayed, hour after hour. When Eli and Noah arrived with Lena the next morning, sleepy and confused, Alexander knelt to their level, voice gentle. Your sister's fighting. She's really brave. Noah stared at him, then pointed. You said. Alexander swallowed hard. Yes, but also hopeful. Eli reached out and touched his cheek, just once, before turning back to the window. And in that moment, something shifted. Not forgiveness, not yet, but recognition. Later that night, as Lily's fever finally broke and her breathing steadied, Clara stepped into the hallway and found Alexander still there, leaning against the wall, eyes closed but not sleeping. She's going to be okay, she said softly. He opened his eyes. I know. Silence stretched between them, but it wasn't empty anymore. It was full of everything unsaid and everything newly possible. You've changed, she whispered. I had to, he said. I lost you once. I won't lose them too. She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time in years, she saw not the magnate, not the ghost, but the man beneath, broken, trying, finally present. And then came the invitation. It arrived on a crisp autumn morning, slipped into Clara's mailbox with no return address. Just elegant cream paper embossed with gold, lettering the annual Vanguard Gala for Children's Health Innovation hosted by the Vance Foundation. Her breath caught. She hadn't seen Alexander in weeks, not since he'd taken the triplets to the zoo while she worked a double shift. He'd sent photos, Eli feeding a giraffe, Noah wide-eyed at the penguins, Lily asleep on his shoulder, thumb in her mouth. She'd saved them all. Now this. Lena leaned over her shoulder, sipping coffee. You're not seriously considering going, are you? Clara ran her thumb over the embossed logo, Vance Foundation. His name, his world, the world he'd once chosen over her. He rebuilt it, she said quietly, from the ground up. No more biotech diagnostics, just pediatric research, ethics-first funding. He even testified before Congress about clinic oversight. And the kids deserve to see that side of him, the man he's become. She hesitated. Besides, it's a fundraiser for the NICU that saved Lily. How can I say no? Lena studied her. Just be careful, Clara. Galas aren't neutral ground. They're stages. And Alexander Vance still knows how to command a room. The night of the gala, Manhattan glittered like a jewel box under a velvet sky. Clara stood at the edge of the grand ballroom in a simple emerald dress, her hair swept up, heart pounding as she scanned the crowd. She hadn't told him she was coming. She wanted to see him before he saw her. Unrehearsed, unguarded. And then she saw him. Alexander stood near the stage, no longer in sharp suits, but in a charcoal tuxedo that fit like armor he no longer needed. He was speaking to a group of donors, but his eyes kept drifting toward the entrance, as if he'd been waiting, hoping. She took a breath and stepped forward, the triplets beside her in matching navy outfits, holding hands like a tiny chain of courage. Eli spotted him first. "Daddy Alex!" he shouted, breaking free and running. Alexander turned and froze. His face, usually so composed, crumpled with emotion. He dropped to one knee as Eli crashed into him, then opened his arms as Noah and Lily followed, clinging to him like he was home. For a long moment, he just held them, eyes closed, whispering words only they could hear. Then he looked up and saw Clara. Time stopped. The music, the chatter, the clinking glasses, all faded into silence. It was just them, across a sea of strangers, 3 years of grief and hope and quiet healing hanging between them like a bridge made of glass. He stood slowly, the children still clinging to his legs, and walked toward her. "You came," he said, voice rough. "I couldn't not," she replied. He glanced down at the triplets, Eli tugging his hand, Noah staring up with quiet awe, Lily already trying to climb his leg again. "They're incredible, Clara. You raised them to be so full of light. They had a good teacher," she said softly, "even from a distance." His eyes glistened. "I don't deserve that." "Maybe not," she said, "but they love you, and that's not something I can or should control." A waiter passed with champagne. Alexander took 2 flutes, handed one to her. Their fingers brushed. A spark, a memory, a question. "You look," he began, then stopped, shaking his head with a small, broken smile. "You look like the woman I fell in love with, only stronger. And you," she said, meeting his gaze, "look like the man I always hoped you could be." Before he could respond, the MC's voice boomed over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Alexander Vance, founder of the Vance Children's Health Initiative." Applause erupted. Alexander squeezed her hand once. Quick, desperate, full of everything he couldn't say, then turned toward the stage. But as he stepped up to the podium, he didn't begin with statistics or funding goals. He looked straight at Clara and the triplets, standing near the front, and said, "3 years ago, I lost everything because I was too afraid to believe in miracles. I thought love was something you controlled, something you earned through success. But then life gave me a second chance, in triplicate." The room fell silent. "My children, Eli, Noah, and Lily, taught me that love isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, even when you're broken, even when you're late." His voice cracked. "And to their mother, thank you for protecting them when I couldn't protect myself from my own fear." Tears streamed down Clara's face. The triplets didn't understand his words, but they felt the shift, the raw honesty, the humility, the love radiating from him like warmth from a long cold hearth. When he finished, the applause was thunderous. But Alexander didn't bow. He stepped down, walked straight to Clara, and knelt before the children. "Can I take you 3 for ice cream after this?" he asked, voice gentle. Lily nodded fiercely. "Chocolate," Eli grinned. "With sprinkles." Noah just reached for his hand. Alexander looked up at Clara, eyes full of hope and fear and 1,000 unspoken promises. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She simply took his free hand, laced her fingers through his, and whispered, but it wasn't natural. "Not yet." Alexander flagged a town car, black, unmarked, no longer the sleek limousine of his magnate days, and helped the children inside. Clara hesitated at the curb, arms crossed, the emerald fabric of her dress catching the streetlight like rippling water. "You don't have to come," he said softly, standing close but not touching. "I can take them home, drop them off. You've had a long night." She looked at him, really looked, and saw the fear beneath his calm, the terror that after all this, after showing up, after changing, after earning this moment, she might still walk away. "I'm not letting you take my children into the night without me," she said, voice low but firm. Not again. He nodded, relief flickering in his eyes. Then get in. Inside the car, Eli chattered about the ice cream he wanted, chocolate with rainbow sprinkles and gummy bears on top, while Lily yawned against Alexander's shoulder, her tiny fingers still curled in his tuxedo lapel. Noah pressed his face to the window, watching the city blur past. Like a dream, Clara sat across from Alexander, knees almost touching, silence thick between them. Not awkward, but charged, like the air before lightning. You were good up there, she finally said. Honest. I meant every word, he replied. I spent years building walls. You were the earthquake that brought them down. She looked away out the window. I didn't do it for you. I did it for them. I know. He paused. But you let me back in. That was for me. She didn't answer, because it was true. The car pulled up to her building, the same one above the bookstore, now filled with crayon drawings on the fridge and tiny shoes by the door. Alexander helped the children out, one by one, lifting Lily gently so as not to wake her, holding Eli's hand as he bounced with sugar-fueled energy, letting Noah walk on his own but staying close, just in case. At her doorstep, Clara turned to him. Thank you. For tonight. For everything. He shifted, hands in his pockets, suddenly unsure. Can I see them tomorrow just for breakfast? I'll make pancakes. Eli likes them shaped like dinosaurs. She studied him, the humility in his posture, the hope in his eyes, the way he'd memorized Eli's dinosaur obsession, Noah's quiet need for space, Lily's love of chocolate. He hadn't just shown up. He'd seen them. Yes, she said, then softer, but not just for breakfast. His breath caught. What do you mean? She stepped closer, voice barely above a whisper. I mean, you've been their father in every way but name for months. Maybe it's time they heard you call yourself that. His eyes filled. And you, what am I to you? She looked past him, to the window where the nightlight glowed softly in the nursery. I don't know yet, but I know this: I don't want them to grow up thinking love is something you walk away from when it gets hard. He reached out, slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he brushed a stray curl from her forehead, his touch feather-light, trembling. I won't, he said. Not ever again. Inside, Lily stirred in her sleep and called out, Dada. The word hung in the air like a miracle. Alexander froze. Clara's breath hitched. Neither of them had taught her that word. She'd made it up. Or maybe her heart had always known. Alexander turned toward the door, tears spilling freely now. Can I just hear her say it again? Clara opened the door. Come in. He stepped over the threshold, not as a guest, not as a stranger, but as someone finally coming home. In the dim hallway, Lily sat up in her crib, rubbing her eyes, and when she saw him, she smiled, wide, sleepy, certain. Dada, she said again, arms reaching. He crossed the room in 3 strides, lifted her gently, and held her like she was the most precious thing he'd ever been given, which she was. They all were. Clara leaned against the doorframe, watching as Eli and Noah appeared in their pajamas, drawn by the sound. Eli ran to Alexander's legs. Noah stood back for a moment, then stepped forward and rested his head against his father's knee. Alexander looked up at Clara over their heads, eyes shining. I missed so much, he whispered. But you're here now, she said, and that's where it starts. Outside, the city slept, but inside, a family, broken, rebuilt, imperfect, whole, began again. Not with grand declarations, but with a child's sleepy voice. Lily, perched on his hip, patted his cheek with a sticky hand. Dada, more chocolate, Alexander laughed. A real, unguarded sound Clara hadn't heard in years. Not for breakfast, little lion, but maybe after your nap. Clara leaned against the counter, watching them. Her chest ached. Not with fear this time, but with something tender and terrifying hope. It was one thing to let him in for a night, another to let him cook breakfast in her kitchen like he belonged, like he always had. He caught her staring and smiled, tentative. I may have overdone the batter. You got the shapes right, she said, stepping closer. That's what matters. Their eyes held for a beat too long. The air between them hummed with everything unsaid. The years lost, the pain endured, the fragile bridge they were building one quiet moment at a time. Then the doorbell rang. Clara frowned. Who? She opened the door to find a woman in a tailored navy suit, holding a leather portfolio. Behind her stood a man with a camera. Not press, but discreet, professional. Mrs. Bennett, the woman said, voice crisp. I'm Evelyn Cho, Senior Counsel for the Manhattan Fertility Center. We're conducting a final review of the settlement agreement regarding the embryo misidentification incident. We understand Mr. Vance is currently present. Clara's blood ran cold. Alexander stepped into the doorway, Lily still in his arms. What is this? Evelyn's gaze flickered to him, then back to Clara. We're required to confirm both parties' acknowledgement of the revised terms before the case is formally closed. Given recent media interest, Clara's voice sharpened. What media? Evelyn hesitated. A journalist from the Chronicle has been investigating systemic errors in reproductive clinics. Your case was flagged as a precedent. They've requested comment. Alexander's jaw tightened. No comment, ever. But Evelyn pressed on. There's also a subpoena from the State Medical Board. They're reopening the inquiry. They need your testimony, both of you. Silence fell like a blade. Inside, Eli looked up, sensing the shift. Mama, what's wrong? Clara forced a smile. Nothing, sweetheart. Just grown-up stuff. She shut the door gently, then turned to Alexander, her eyes blazing. You said you handled this. You said it was over. I did, he said, voice low. I testified. I funded the ethics overhaul. I thought, you thought they'd bury it? She cut in, voice trembling. But they won't. Not when there are other women out there who lost pregnancies, lost hope, because of that clinic's negligence. And now they're dragging us back into it, on the front page. Lily began to fuss, sensing the tension. Alexander rocked her gently, but his eyes never left Clara's. I'll protect you, all of you. How? She whispered. By shutting it down again, by using your money, your power, to make it disappear. That's not protection, Alex. That's control. He flinched. That's not what I meant. Then what do you mean? She stepped closer, voice breaking. Because if this story breaks, the world will know everything. That I hid the pregnancy, that you left, that I raised them alone. And the triplets. They'll grow up with their origin story splashed across headlines like a scandal. They'll know the truth, he said fiercely. That their mother was brave. That their father was a fool who finally woke up. That love isn't perfect, but it's worth fighting for. Tears welled in her eyes. And what if the world twists it? What if they call me a liar, a gold digger? What if they say you only came back because of the scandal? He set Lily down gently, knelt before Clara, and took her hands. Calloused from work, warm from the kitchen, trembling in his grip. Then we face it together, he said. Not as Alexander Vance, magnate. Not as Clara Bennett, the wronged wife. But as parents. As a family. Let them see what real redemption looks like. She searched his face. The lines around his eyes deeper now. The arrogance gone. Replaced by something raw and true. Outside, the city buzzed, unaware of the quiet earthquake happening in this sunlit kitchen. Eli tugged Alexander's sleeve. Dada, my Dino's melting. Alexander smiled through tears. Then we'll make a new one. Clara took a shaky breath, then nodded. Okay, she whispered. Together. But as she turned back to the stove, her hands steady but her heart racing, she knew this wasn't just about testimony or headlines. Alexander stood by the window, arms crossed, gaze fixed on the street below. He hadn't slept. None of them had. Ever since Evelyn Cho's visit, the air between them had been charged with something fragile, hope laced with dread. They want us to testify separately, Clara said, voice flat. They say it's protocol, but I know what it is. They're testing our story, seeing if it matches. It does, he said quietly, because it's the truth. She looked up, eyes red-rimmed but sharp. Is it because from where I stand, there are two truths? Mine, I carried them alone, terrified, abandoned. Yours, you thought I lied, so you walked away. Both are true. But which one will the board believe? Which one will the press spin? He turned to her then, stepping closer, his voice low and urgent. Then let's give them a third truth. The one that matters now. We're choosing each other. Not out of guilt, not out of obligation, but because we see what we almost lost, and we refuse to lose it again. She shook her head, tears spilling over. It's not that simple, Alex. If I go in there and say you left me when I told you I was pregnant with triplets, they'll crucify you. Your foundation, your reputation. I don't care about my reputation, he cut in, kneeling before her, taking her hands. I care about them knowing their father wasn't a monster. He was broken. He was wrong. But he came back. And he stayed. She pulled her hands away, stood, walked to the window. What if staying isn't enough? What if the board decides you're still a liability? What if they bar you from the foundation, from the ethics panels, from everything you've built to make amends? Then I'll build something else, he said simply. With my hands, with my time, with whatever I have left. As long as I have them, and you, I don't need anything else. She turned, eyes searching his. Why now? Why fight so hard when you didn't before? He swallowed hard. Because before, I thought love was something you earned by being perfect. Now I know it's something you fight for by being honest. Even when it destroys you. A silence settled between them, thick with the ghosts of the past and the trembling promise of the future. Then, from the hallway, Lily's voice, sleepy, clear, Mama Dada. They both turned. She stood in the doorway in footed pajamas, hair wild, one thumb in her mouth, the other hand holding Noah's. Eli peeked out behind them, clutching a stuffed triceratops. Alexander stood, walked to them, knelt. Hey, my loves, did you have sweet dreams? Lily nodded. Dreamed you stayed. His breath hitched. He pulled all three into a gentle hug, his voice thick. I'm not going anywhere. Clara watched them. This man who once ruled boardrooms now kneeling on a worn rug, whispering promises to children who'd never known a world without his absence, yet still called him Dada with unwavering trust. That night, after the kids were asleep, she found him on the fire escape, staring at the stars, a legal pad in his lap filled with notes for his testimony. She sat beside him, shoulders touching. I'll go first, she said. I'll tell them everything. The fear, the loneliness, the clinic's error. And I'll tell them you didn't know, that you were misled too. He looked at her, stunned. You do that after everything? I do it for them, she said softly. So they never have to choose between loving us. He reached for her hand, laced his fingers through hers. And what about you? Do you love me? She didn't answer right away. She looked out at the city, the same skyline that had watched her cry alone, that had seen him walk away, that now held their fragile second chance. I love the man you're becoming, she whispered, and I'm learning to trust the man you've been. He leaned his forehead against hers. That's enough. For now, it's enough. But deep down, they both knew the testimony wasn't just about the past. Down the hall, Alexander sat on the living room floor, surrounded by the triplets. He'd brought them breakfast, oatmeal with banana slices, their favorite, and was helping Eli spell his name with alphabet magnets while Noah stacked blocks into a wobbling tower and Lily read a picture book upside down, narrating her own story in babbling earnestness. When Clara entered the room, all three looked up. Mama! Lily dropped the book and ran, arms outstretched. Clara knelt, catching her, pressing her face into the soft curve of her daughter's neck, inhaling the scent of baby shampoo and sleep and home. She needed this, needed to remember why she was walking into that room. You look pretty, Eli said, eyes wide. Thank you, love. She kissed his forehead, then Noah's, before standing. Alexander rose slowly, brushing crumbs from his trousers. He wore a dark suit, not the sharp, power-cut kind from his magnate days, but softer, humbler. He hadn't shaved perfectly. A shadow lined his jaw. He looked like a man who'd been up all night praying, not preening. You don't have to come, Clara said quietly, so the children wouldn't hear. They only called me for the first session. I know, he replied, voice low. But I'll wait outside, in case you need me. She searched his face. What if they ask about you? What if I say something that makes it worse? Then it'll be the truth, he said simply. And I can live with that. She nodded, throat tight. Then, before she could stop herself, she reached out and straightened his tie, her fingers brushing his collar, lingering just a second too long. He caught her hand. Clara? I'm scared, she whispered. So am I. He squeezed her fingers. But we're not alone anymore. A knock at the door startled them both. Lena stood there, holding a thermos and a paper bag. Brought coffee and courage, she said, stepping inside. You're not facing that room without backup. Clara hugged her fiercely. Thank you. As Lena distracted the kids with a game of I Spy, Alexander pulled Clara aside near the window. There's something I need you to know, he said, voice urgent but soft. Last night, I got a call from Dr. Lang, the lead embryologist from the original clinic. She's coming forward, voluntarily. She has the original lab logs, the ones they buried. They show the mix-up was intentional, a cover-up after a junior tech used an unapproved storage protocol. They falsified the retraction to avoid liability. Clara's breath caught. She's testifying. She's submitting everything to the board today, before your session. He looked at her, eyes blazing with quiet fury. They didn't just make a mistake, Clara. They lied. To both of us. Tears welled in her eyes. Not of sadness, but of vindication. All those months of doubt, of wondering if she'd imagined it, of carrying the weight of being called delusional. It hadn't been in her head. It had been in their files. She's doing it because of the triplets, Alexander added. She said, seeing them at the gala, hearing Lily call me Dada. It broke something in her. She couldn't stay silent anymore. Clara covered her mouth, shoulders shaking. All this time, we were right. We were right, he confirmed, voice thick. And today, the world will know it. The car ride to the medical board's downtown office was silent, save for the hum of traffic and the occasional sip of coffee. Clara stared out the window, watching the city blur past, each building a witness to her grief, her strength, her return. When they arrived, Alexander walked her to the entrance, stopping just outside the heavy oak doors. I'll be right here, he said, touching her elbow gently. When it's over, I'll be waiting. She nodded, took a deep breath, and stepped inside. The hearing room was cold, sterile, lined with faces in dark suits and unreadable expressions. At the center table sat Dr. Lang. Older now, hair gray, hands folded tightly in front of her. She looked up as Clara entered, and for the first time, offered a small, sorrowful nod. Clara took her seat. The board chair, a woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, began. Mrs. Bennett, you've filed a formal request to amend the public record regarding the 2021 embryo misidentification incident involving Manhattan Fertility Center. Please state your testimony. Clara straightened her spine, looked directly at Dr. Lang, then at the board. I didn't lose a pregnancy, she said, voice clear, steady, ringing with quiet power. I carried triplets to term. I gave birth to them in the city, in St. Luke's NICU, on a night it snowed so hard the world disappeared. Their names are Eli, Noah, and Lily Vance. And the man who walked away from me that night, he's the same man who stood outside their incubator for hours, too ashamed to knock, until they got sick, and he finally learned how to show up. She paused, tears glistening but not falling. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here so no other woman has to choose between silence and survival. So no other father has to live with the lie that his children never existed. Dr. Lang began to cry, and in that moment, Clara knew the truth wasn't just freeing. She walked into them without hesitation. For a long moment, they held each other in the hush of the city's breath, the world narrowing to the steady beat of his heart against her ear, the warmth of his hands pressing her close like she might vanish if he let go. They believed her, Clara whispered against his chest. Dr. Lang showed them the logs, the cover-up. They're opening a full investigation. The clinic's license. It's over. He nodded, jaw tight. Good. But she pulled back, searching his face. It's not just them, Alex. Your company, Vance Biogenics, had a partnership with that clinic. Shared data protocols. Joint funding. The board mentioned it. They said your foundation could be implicated by association. He didn't flinch. Then let it be. She stared at him. What? I've already filed the paperwork, he said, voice quiet but resolute. This morning, before you went in. I'm dissolving the Vance Biogenics legacy entirely. Every contract with reproductive clinics terminated. Every shared database wiped and audited. And the foundation, it's being restructured under a new name, the Eli, Noah, and Lily Initiative. Independent board. Full transparency. No ties to my past empire. Her breath caught. You'd walk away from everything you rebuilt. I'm not walking away, he said, cupping her face gently. I'm building something better. Something that honors them and you. I won't let my name be attached to a system that failed you. Not again. Tears welled in her eyes. People will say you're doing it for publicity, to look noble. Let them, he said with a small, tired smile. I'm doing it because it's right, and because I finally understand legacy isn't what you leave behind in boardrooms. It's what you protect in your children's eyes. She leaned her forehead against his. You've changed so much. I had to, he whispered. I lost you once by choosing power over love. I won't make that mistake twice. They stood there as the mist softened around them, the city humming with indifferent life, unaware that a man who once moved markets had just dismantled his own empire. Not for profit, but for penance. Later that evening, back in Clara's apartment, the triplets asleep in their room, Alexander sat at the kitchen table with a stack of legal documents. Clara poured 2 mugs of tea, chamomile as always, and sat across from him. You didn't have to do this alone, she said softly. I needed to, he replied, not looking up. This was my mess, my responsibility. But it's our future, she countered. And you keep acting like you have to earn it all by yourself. He finally met her gaze. How do I stop? She reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. By letting me stand beside you, not behind you, not in front of you, beside you. He turned his hand, lacing his fingers through hers. I'm scared I'll fail again. We all fail, she said. But love isn't about never falling. It's about who helps you up and who you help up in return. Outside, the city lights flickered like distant stars. Inside, something quiet and unbreakable settled between them. The next morning, news broke Vance Biogenics severs ties with controversial fertility network. Founder launches new ethics-first pediatric health initiative. Reporters camped outside Clara's building. Cameras flashed. Headlines buzzed. But inside, Alexander was on the floor of the living room, helping Eli glue googly eyes onto a cardboard dinosaur, while Lily helped by eating the glue stick and Noah sat quietly beside him, showing him how to draw birds with careful, precise lines. Clara watched from the doorway, heart full. The world was watching them now, scrutinizing, judging, speculating. She burst into the ER, breathless, hair escaping its ponytail, eyes wild. Lily Bennett, where is she? A nurse pointed down the hall. Pediatric triage. Room 4. Clara ran. But when she turned the corner, she stopped dead. Alexander was already there. He stood just inside the doorway, one hand braced against the wall, the other gripping the back of a chair, his face ashen. Lena sat beside Lily's gurney, holding her tiny hand, tears streaking her cheeks. And Lily, her fierce, bright Lily, lay listless, eyes half closed, skin flushed with fever, an oxygen monitor clipped to her toe. Clara rushed to her side. Baby, I'm here. Mama's here. Lily turned her head weakly, lips trembling. Dada? Alexander flinched as if struck. He hadn't spoken since arriving, hadn't dared. But now, at the sound of his name on her lips, soft, trusting, certain, he stepped forward. I'm here, Lily, he said, voice rough with emotion. He didn't touch her. Not yet, but knelt beside the gurney, close enough for her to see him. "I've got you." The doctor entered, brisk and calm. "We're running blood cultures. Could be a viral infection, but given her preemie history, we're treating it as critical until proven otherwise. We may need to admit her." Clara nodded, numb. "Okay, whatever she needs." But as the doctor left, Lily's breathing hitched, shallow, rapid. Her oxygen saturation dropped. Alarms beeped. Nurses rushed in. "Get a crash cart ready," someone shouted. And in that moment, Clara froze. Not from fear, from memory. This was the same room, the same panic, the same helplessness. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe, but Alexander did. He didn't hesitate, didn't wait for permission. He stepped back, cleared space, barked orders with a calm authority that surprised even the staff. "Elevate her head. Check her airway. Call respiratory now." He wasn't the magnate. He wasn't the penitent. He was a father, instinctive, fierce, present. When a nurse tried to usher Clara out, "Ma'am, you need to step back." Alexander turned, eyes blazing. "She stays. Both of us stay." The nurse hesitated, then nodded. Minutes stretched like hours. Then, slowly, Lily's numbers stabilized. Her breathing deepened. The crisis passed. Clara sank into a chair, trembling, tears finally spilling over. Alexander knelt before her, hands on her knees, his own eyes wet. "You were amazing," she whispered. "I just did what you've done 1,000 times, he said. "You've been their hero since day one. Today, I just got to stand beside you." She covered his hands with hers. "You didn't run. I'll never run again," he vowed. "Not from this, not from you." Later, as Lily slept under soft monitors, Alexander sat on the edge of the hospital bed, gently stroking her hair. Clara leaned against the wall, watching him. The way his shoulders had softened, the way his voice dropped to a whisper when he spoke to her, the way he looked at his daughter like she was the only miracle that ever mattered. Lena slipped in quietly, holding 2 coffees. "You two look like you've been through war." "We have," Clara said softly. "But we're still standing," Alexander added, not looking away from Lily. Lena handed Clara a coffee, then hesitated. "The press is outside. Again. They heard about the hospital visit. They're calling it the triplets' second medical scare. Some are saying it's karma for the scandal." Alexander's jaw tightened, but he didn't rise to the bait. "Let them talk. They don't know her. They don't know us." Clara walked to the window, pulling the curtain shut. "All that matters is in this room." And it was true. Outside, the world spun with noise and judgment. But here, in the quiet hum of monitors, in the steady rhythm of a father's hand on his daughter's forehead, in the silent understanding between 2 broken people who'd chosen to heal together, there was only love. Real, imperfect, unshakable. Lily stirred in her sleep, reached out blindly, and found Alexander's finger. She curled her tiny hand around it and sighed. He looked at Clara, eyes shining. "She trusts me." Clara watched him from the hallway, arms crossed, heart aching in a way she hadn't expected. Not with fear this time, but with something deeper awe. He changed Eli's diaper in the middle of the night without being asked. He'd coaxed Noah to eat hospital jello by pretending it was dinosaur lava. He'd sat for hours holding Lily's hand, reading her a story in a voice so soft it barely stirred the air, yet filled the room with tenderness. Now, as dawn painted the sky in pale gold, he stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in low, firm tones. "No, I'm not coming in," he said. "Cancel the board meeting. Reschedule the investor call. If they can't understand that my daughter's health comes before quarterly projections, then they don't belong in my foundation." He hung up, ran a hand over his face, exhausted, unshaven, utterly human, and turned to find Clara leaning in the doorway. "You didn't have to do that," she said softly. "I did," he replied, walking toward her. "Because for the first time, I know what matters." She looked past him, into the room where Lily slept, chest rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. "She called for you in her sleep again. Dada, stay." His throat worked. "I heard." They stood in silence for a moment, the hospital's quiet hum wrapping around them like a blanket. Then Clara said, "You're different with them. Not just careful, not just present. You're soft." He smiled faintly. "They broke me open, in the best way." She stepped closer. And me, his eyes met hers. Deep, honest, full of everything he'd spent years running from. "You were the first crack in the wall. They just helped me tear it down." A nurse entered quietly, checking Lily's vitals. "She's stable. We'll move her to a regular room this afternoon." After she left, Alexander turned back to Clara. "Come here." He didn't touch her, just held out his hand. She took it, and together they walked into the room. Lily stirred as they approached, blinking sleepily. When she saw them, both of them standing together, her face lit up. "Mama! Dada!" Alexander sat on the edge of the bed, and Clara perched beside him. Lily reached for them both, tiny arms stretching wide. He lifted her gently into his lap, and Clara wrapped an arm around them both, resting her head on his shoulder. For a long moment, they just existed like that, three hearts beating in fragile harmony. The past forgiven but not forgotten, the future uncertain but shared. Then Lily yawned, snuggling into Alexander's chest. "Dada, sing." He looked at Clara, surprised. "She wants me to sing." Clara nodded, smiling through tears. "She's heard me sing that lullaby 1,000 times. Now she wants yours." He swallowed hard, then began, voice rough, off-key, trembling with emotion. The same lullaby Clara always sang, "Hush now, my darling, the stars are awake." Lily closed her eyes, content. And Clara realized this was the moment she'd stopped guarding her heart. Because love wasn't about never being hurt. It was about choosing, every day, to let someone back in even after they'd left. Later that afternoon, as Eli and Noah arrived with Lena, bursting with drawings and stuffed animals, Alexander knelt to greet them, pulling them into a group hug that included Lily, still in his arms. "You're staying, right?" Noah asked quietly, looking up at him. Alexander didn't hesitate. "Every day, as long as you'll have me." Eli grinned. "Even on broccoli nights?" "Even on broccoli nights." Alexander laughed, ruffling his hair. Clara stood back, watching them. This man who once ruled empires, now building a kingdom of bedtime stories, sticky fingers, and whispered lullabies, and felt something settle inside her, deep and sure. That night, after the children were asleep in the hospital's family room, Eli and Noah on cots, Lily in a crib beside the bed, Clara found Alexander on the balcony, staring at the city lights. "She's going to be okay," she said, joining him. "I know," he said, "but I keep thinking, what if I hadn't been there? What if I'd still been the man who walked away?" "You're not him anymore," she said softly. "No," he agreed, "but I owe him a debt. Because if he hadn't made that mistake, I'd never have learned how to love like this." She leaned into him, shoulder to shoulder. "This is what we were supposed to have all along." He turned, cupped her face gently. "Is it too late to ask for more than just co-parenting?" Her breath caught. "What are you asking, Alex?" "I'm asking," he hesitated, eyes searching hers, "if there's still room for us, not just as parents, but as us." She looked at him. The man who'd stood in an ER and fought for his daughter like a lion, who'd given up an empire to protect their truth, who sang off-key lullabies with tears in his eyes, and saw not the ghost of her past, but the promise of her future. But nights were harder, not because of the space between their rooms, though that silence still ached, but because of the ghosts that lingered in the quiet. One evening, after the triplets were asleep, Clara found Alexander on the fire escape, staring at the city with a half-empty mug of tea in his hands. Rain threatened in the distance, the air thick with unspoken things. She stepped out beside him, arms crossed against the cool night. "You're thinking about it again, aren't you?" He didn't look at her. "About how I left you, about how I missed their first steps, their first words, their first fevers, about how I chose a boardroom over your voice on the phone saying, 'I'm pregnant with triplets.'" His voice cracked on the last word. Clara leaned against the railing, shoulder almost touching his. "I used to dream about it, she said softly. Not the leaving, the moment before. When I told you, I'd replay it 1,000 ways. What if I'd been calmer? What if I'd shown you the ultrasound first? What if I'd begged? He turned to her then, eyes glistening. None of that would have mattered. The problem wasn't you. It was me. I was so terrified of failing, of not being enough, that I'd rather walk away than risk being broken by hope. She nodded. I know, and that's why I stayed angry for so long. Not because you left, but because you didn't fight for us. I'm fighting now, he whispered. I see that, she said. But fighting isn't just showing up. It's staying when it gets hard. It's trusting that love doesn't have to be perfect to be real. He set his mug down and faced her fully. Then let me prove it. Not with grand gestures. Not with foundations or speeches. Just with time. With showing up, day after day, even when you're still afraid of me. She looked into his eyes, the same eyes that once held cold calculation, now softened by humility and something tender, something true. I am afraid, she admitted, not of you, but of hoping again. Because if I let myself believe this is real, and it falls apart, it won't, he said fiercely. Because I'd rather lose everything I've built than lose you again. A silence settled between them, filled only by the distant hum of the city and the soft patter of the first raindrops. Then, from inside, Lily cried out in her sleep, just a soft whimper, but enough to make them both turn. Alexander moved first, instinctive, protective, but Clara caught his arm. Wait, he froze. She took a breath, heart pounding. Let me go, but come with me. Just stand in the doorway. Let her see us both. He nodded, eyes wide with understanding. They entered the nursery together. Lily stirred, eyes fluttering open. When she saw them, Clara approaching, Alexander just behind, both silhouetted in the soft night light, she reached out with both arms. Mama, Dada? Clara lifted her, cradling her close, and Alexander stepped forward, resting a hand on Lily's back, his other brushing Clara's shoulder. Light, tentative, asking. Clara didn't pull away. Lily sighed, content, and drifted back to sleep between them. In the dim glow, Alexander whispered, I used to think love was something you controlled, a transaction, a performance. But you taught me it's a choice. Every single day. Clara looked at him, tears glistening. And you taught me that people can change. Not overnight, not perfectly, but deeply. He reached up, brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. So, is there room for us not just in their lives, but in each other's? She leaned into his touch, just slightly. There's room, but it's fragile, like glass. Then I'll hold it gently, he promised. Outside, the rain began in earnest, soft, cleansing, washing the city clean. And inside, in a nursery filled with the quiet breaths of sleeping children, two broken souls stood shoulder to shoulder, not healed, not whole, but finally choosing to mend, together. He walked toward her, stopping just an arm's length away. Can we talk outside? She nodded. They stepped onto the fire escape again. The city spread below them like a sea of stars. The air smelled of wet pavement and distant blossoms. Clara wrapped her arms around herself, not from cold, but from the weight of what she knew was coming. Alexander leaned against the railing, not looking at her. I found something today, he said quietly, in the back of my old desk drawer. Letters, dozens of them. Her breath caught. What letters? Yours. He finally turned to her, eyes glistening. The ones you never sent. I didn't know they existed until I was cleaning out the penthouse last week. They were tucked inside a book, The Little Prince. You left it behind. She closed her eyes. She remembered that book. She'd read it aloud to herself during the loneliest nights of her pregnancy, imagining she was reading it to him. I wrote them when I thought you'd never come back, she whispered. When I needed to say things I couldn't say out loud. I read every one, he said, voice breaking. The one where you told me you felt the first kick and cried because I wasn't there. The one where you named them before they were born. The one where you wrote, if you ever find these, Know that I loved you even when you couldn't love yourself." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I need you to know. I didn't just come back for them," he said, stepping closer. "I came back because your words, they haunted me. They showed me the man I'd been, and the man I could still become. You never gave up on me, even when I gave up on us." She shook her head. "I didn't give up on you. I gave up on waiting. There's a difference." "I know." He reached for her hand, and this time she let him take it. "And I don't expect you to forget what I did. But I need you to hear this. I'm not asking for your forgiveness to ease my guilt. I'm asking for a chance to earn your trust. Not as the man who left, but as the man who stayed." She looked at him, really looked, and saw the years etched in the lines around his eyes, the humility in his posture, the raw honesty in his gaze. This wasn't the Alexander who'd walked out on her. This was someone forged in regret, tempered by love, rebuilt by grace. "I kept letters too," she said softly. "Not to you, to them, in case you never came back. I wrote about the day each of them was born, about how Eli smiled for the first time, how Noah whispered bird when he saw a sparrow, how Lily fought so hard just to breathe." His breath hitched. "Can I read them?" She hesitated, then nodded. "But not tonight. When the time is right." He squeezed her hand. "I'll wait." A silence settled between them, but it wasn't empty. It was full of promise. Then softly, she said, "Why did you really leave?" "Alex, not the excuse about work or pressure. The truth." He looked down, then back at her, eyes full of pain. "Because I was terrified that if I let myself believe we were having children, and then lost them, I wouldn't survive it. So I pushed you away before the loss could destroy me. I chose control over vulnerability. And in doing so, I lost everything that mattered." She nodded slowly. "I thought it was because you didn't want them." "Never," he said fiercely. "I wanted them so much it terrified me. And that fear, it made me cruel." She took a shaky breath. "I need to know, if we try this, if we let ourselves be more than co-parents, what happens when it gets hard again, when the world watches, when the past resurfaces, when one of them gets sick and you're faced with that fear all over again?" He didn't look away. "Then I'll choose you, every time. Not because I'm perfect, but because you're worth the risk." She searched his face, looking for hesitation, for the old arrogance, for any sign that this was performance, not truth. She found none. Instead, she saw a man who'd been shattered and had used the pieces to build something better. "I have one more letter," she whispered. "The last one I wrote, the night before Lily got sick the first time. I never finished it." "What did it say?" She looked out at the city, voice trembling. It said, "If you ever find your way back to us, don't just stay for them. Stay for me too, because I'm still here, and I'm still yours, if you're brave enough to claim me." He pulled her into his arms then, not with desperation, but with reverence. She didn't resist. She leaned into him, her tears soaking into his shirt, her hands gripping the fabric like she was afraid he'd vanish. "I'm brave now," he whispered into her hair, "because you taught me that love isn't weakness. It's the only thing worth fighting for." Inside, Alexander stood at the kitchen counter, flipping pancakes into clumsy dinosaur shapes, while Clara poured orange juice into tiny glasses. She watched him from the corner of her eye, the way he hummed off-key, the way he still checked on the kids every few minutes, the way his eyes softened whenever Lily called for him. They hadn't rushed. There had been no grand proposal, no dramatic declaration. Just slow, steady steps, shared meals, late-night talks on the porch, hands brushing while folding laundry, kisses that started as comfort and grew into something deeper. They'd rebuilt not on the ruins of what was broken, but on the quiet foundation of who they'd become. Now, as Eli burst through the back door, covered in grass stains and grinning, Alexander turned with a plate of pancakes. "Dino feast is ready." But before Eli could grab one, Clara placed a hand on Alexander's arm. "Wait." He looked at her, sensing the shift in her voice. She took a deep breath, then reached into the pocket of her apron and pulled out a small velvet box. His eyes widened. Clara, she opened it. Inside wasn't a ring, but a silver rattle, slightly tarnished, engraved with 3 tiny initials NL. I found it, she said softly, in the back of your old desk drawer. The one you bought the day we started IVF. You never gave it to me. He stared at it, throat working. I was waiting for the right moment. This is it, she said, placing the box in his palm. Not because we're perfect, not because the past is gone, but because we chose each other every single day, even when it was hard. He looked up at her, tears glistening. I don't deserve you. You don't, she said with a small smile. But I choose you anyway. He pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers. Then let me ask you properly. He dropped to one knee, not for show, but because this moment deserved reverence. Clara Bennett, he said, voice thick with emotion. You were my first love, my greatest loss, and now my second chance. I don't need a ring to prove I'm yours. But if you'll have me, not as the man I was, but as the man I'm still becoming, I'd be honored to spend the rest of my life loving you, protecting you, and raising our children with you. From the doorway, Lily's voice piped up, Mary, Dada, Mama. They both laughed through tears. Clara took his hand, pulled him to his feet, and kissed him, slow, deep, full of everything they'd survived and everything they'd built. Yes, she whispered against his lips. 1,000 times, yes. Later that evening, as the fireflies danced in the garden and the triplets slept soundly in their beds, Alexander and Clara sat on the porch swing, fingers entwined, silence comfortable between them. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if the clinic hadn't made that error? He asked quietly. She leaned her head on his shoulder. Sometimes, but then I look at them and I realize the error didn't break us. It revealed us. It showed me my strength. It showed you your heart. He kissed the top of her head, and it gave us them. Inside, through the open window, Lily stirred in her sleep and murmured, Dada, Mama. They both smiled, because this wasn't a fairy tale with a perfect beginning. It was a love story forged in loss, tested by time, and redeemed by choice. And as the stars blinked awake above them, Alexander Vance, once a magnate who ruled with control, held the hand of the woman who taught him that the greatest power wasn't in building empires, but in building a home. And Clara Bennett, once a woman who carried miracles alone, finally let herself be held, knowing she was no longer just their mother. She was loved.